I'm just really excited about the doors that God's opening. And it's really important to know that when you're going through things, and this is leading into my message now, so I'm about to start preaching my message for those on the video and those who are going to use it. I've called my message, "It is well, isn't it?" And I'm going to go through the story in a minute that I'm going to use, but I believe that we are living in a day so much so that we need to be convinced that it is well. That's what Chanel preached this morning, shared this morning in her communion, that being thankful, being grateful, being open to what God's doing. I love the difference between a mature Christian and an immature Christian. You know, you can get offended over that, or you can grow and change and go, God, if I'm that person, I need to change. If I'm unthankful, you know, I had this conversation, Janine and I had this conversation with our son this week, who is just on the edge of, like, not our youngest one, our eldest one, who has a job and all that sort of stuff, but he just can't make ends meet, and they do everything right. They really do. They tithe, they give, they do everything right. But what I've noticed is the attitude, the expectation that I did, God should. And so we had to walk him through that this week, and we've seen an incredible change in him, just the way that he deals with his life now, just in a few days. That's prayer too, you know, mum's prayer and all that sort of stuff, seeing it change. But it's a really important thing. But it comes to a point of us saying, is it well? Because the Bible tells us it is. And so we've got to come to a place of discovering where it is. And I want to read a story to you from 2 Kings chapter 4. It says this, "Now there came a day," can't think of the word, but I need to let you know that I immersed myself into this story this last few weeks. I've been reading it, and I've become the Shunammite woman. So this is the story of the Shunammite woman, and if you don't know it, you'll get to hear it in a minute. And I began to feel what I want you to understand when I'm doing when I'm reading now. I want you to know that I'm not saying this is God, this is just Darren being Darren, who's learned over the last 4 years of reading the Bible through and through, is that now this year is my immersion year. I'm putting myself into the stories of what it feels like to be in this moment. What would you be going through and all that sort of thing. And I may get that wrong, but this is what I'm imagining the story to be like. So there came a day when Elisha passed over to Shunem. Shunem is a village that is in Israel, and he was coming through here. Elisha had just been, if you get confused about the Elijah-Elisha thing, just don't worry about it, everybody else does too. Who was that guy? Was it Elijah that did that, or was it Elisha that did that? Janine and I were arguing this week about whether it was Elijah or Elisha. We had to get the book out again and go, it was Elisha, or no, it was Elijah, all that. So we get it. So look, just follow the story with me. So he has just been handed the baton. Elijah has been taken away in a chariot of fire, and the promise was if he saw him, he would get a double portion anointing of what was on Elijah. So he gets it because he sees him get taken away by fire, in a chariot of fire. So he's walked away. A couple of things happened in between. In chapter 2 that happened, in chapter 3 some stuff happened. Now we're in chapter 4, and he comes out, he's crossed over, back over into Israel, into the area that he was in, and he comes across a woman who has all this problem with her sons. She's run out of money, basically, and he says, go and get a bunch of jars, fill them up, and then just keep pouring a little bit of oil you have. And if you know the story, it just keeps going until she gets to the last jar, and it stops. Pretty cool stuff, hey? That's not the story we're talking about today. The next story, he does 5 miracles. We're talking about the second one now. The second one that he does right now is that he comes to a point and meets this lady in Shunem, where a prominent, verse 8, where there was, chapter 4, verse 8. So where there was a prominent woman, and she persuaded him to eat food. So it was as often as he passed by. So he was obviously going past by a number of times. And he turned in there to eat her food. So she must have been a good cook. Like, really, honestly. I mean, I don't know what they did, but whatever they cooked back in those days, she must have been good at it. Because he would stop by, and any man of God that was walking through picking up on food must have been, I'm on a good gig here. So she said to her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God passing by us continually. So she's picked up that there's something different about this guy. And she's going, please, in verse 10, please let us make a little walled upper chamber and let us set a bed for him there and a table and a chair and a lampstand. And it shall be when he comes to us that he can go there so he can use it. So they've built it in there. Just by the by, the word Shunem and Shunammite means this, double resting place. Think about this for a minute, is that she has a house that she's got. She's built it and it's a resting place. I don't know about you, but my house is my resting place. And when I'm really up there with stress, I can go. I know exactly where I go in my home. And then I know it's either the kitchen or it's into the lounge room. I've got my spaces where I go. And so I distress. It's a resting place for me. It's also a resting place for God. But it says it's a double resting place. And the interesting thing that she did here was that on top of her house, she built another resting place for the man of God, where God's presence was, where things were happening for her in that space. But that's just a little side note. So she passed by. I perceive that this is a holy man of God who passes by us continually. Verse 10, please let us make a little walled upper chamber and let us set a bed for him there and a table and a chair and a lampstand. And it will be when he comes to us that he can turn in there. Verse 11, one day he came there and he turned to the upper chamber and he rested. So he would have been walking, I gather. He rested there. It says, verse 12, then he said to Gehazi, his servant, call this Shunammite. Notice her name is never used. Never called out, never has a name, doesn't say it, but it says, call this Shunammite. And when he called her, she stood before him. Call the Shunammite, she's standing before him. And when he said to this, he said in verse 13, when he said to her, say now to her, so he's speaking through Gehazi to her, right? So he's not even talking to her. He says, say now, some of us would be sitting in the room going, how rude. I'm right here. You know, you've had those conversations. You know I'm in the room when you're talking about me and all that sort of. So this is the whole thing. He says to her, say now to her, behold, you have been careful with it you have been careful for us with all this care. So she's obviously gone over and above the what it takes to, that's a whole new thing in hospitality right there. But what can I do for you? Would you be spoken for to the king or to the captain of the army? That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? If somebody said to you, Chanel, thanks for doing all that today. I'm going to have a chat to the Prime Minister about you. I think you deserve that. I think that would be cool, wouldn't you? Half of you liberal people would be going, no, I wouldn't hear a thing from him. It's still the office. He's a Prime Minister. Off with their heads. That's what it is. But would you be spoken for to the king or to the captain of the army? And she answered, I live among my own people. She's happy. This woman is content. I live among my own people. Verse 14. So he said, what then is to be done for her? Some many musings went on. He probably had a big beard, not quite as handsome as mine, but he would have had a beard. He would have rubbed it and gone, what could we do? Gehazi was thinking about it with him. Gehazi answered, listen to this, truly, she has no son and her husband is old. He said, call her. Elisha goes, a brilliant idea. Call her. Get her in the room. Notice God hasn't said anything here. This is them being good. This is a blessing coming towards her. For what? For what she did to the man of God. She created space. She made room. She made room for him, and she created. And she said, Gehazi goes, she has no children. I can just imagine, my whole Monty Python voices are kicking in here. And she has no children. I can hear Elisha going, oh, bring her before them. And so she comes into the room. She comes in. Elisha is standing there, and he goes, what can be done for her? He says, bring her in. Call her. When he had called her, she stood in the doorway. She just stood there. I have seen some those sort of homes they lived in, and they're like, if I was in the doorway, if Ethan was in the doorway, it'd be like this. But she stood in the doorway. And then he said to her, at this season, so this same time next year, you will embrace a son. Listen to this bit here. So imagine now, she is a woman without children. The man of God has just said, and so we know, if you've been in the church a long time, you know what that meant for this lady. No children, nothing. Barren. The man of God says to her, this time next year, you're going to have a son. And she says this, no, my Lord, O man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. Imagine now, take yourself out of reading a King James version or a New American Standard version or an amplified version and put yourself in this woman's feet. She, for years, has probably said, it would be nice to have children. She's probably even prayed it would come. But now she's in a space where it hasn't happened, and this guy comes along and says, you know what, I want to do something good for you. You're going to have a kid next year. And she goes, no. Mm-mm. Don't you say that. Don't do that. He goes on in verse 17, the woman conceived. Too sorry about that. She conceived and bore a son at that season next year. And as Elisha had said to her, when the child was grown, so time had passed, obviously. So when 17 to 18, I don't know how old the child was, but let's 7 or 8, maybe. I don't know. Could be 4 or 5, but could be 3. I don't know. Doesn't say. We don't get a picture of that. But when the child is grown, the day came that he went out to his father to the reapers. So I'm thinking he's of some sort of age, because it sounds like it was a day that he would go out. It sounded to me, as I read that, it feels like the day came where he gets to go and work amongst the reapers with his father. And they could be very young at that age, couldn't they? We don't know. Doesn't really matter. But he goes out to the reapers. He said to his father, my head. He said to his servant, the father turned to his servant, he said, carry him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her lap until noon. So here she is. Here she is. Sorry, photography people. He sees the servant coming in with a boy with a headache. He said, your husband said something's wrong with him. Here he is, and she takes him. So now this is a woman who's been given a son who she didn't ask for, had been asking for, but had given up hope mostly because the words that she says is don't say that. So now he comes into the room and she holds him, and it says, she held him until noon. Can you imagine what was going through her? Can you imagine the anguish that would have been going through her, going, this was a gift that I didn't ask for. This was something God, so this is going to happen. And it says that, it goes on, my head carried him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She's rocking. I imagine she would have held him, and as she saw the life slip from him, as she saw the life slip and held him in his hands, she would have had that anguish, like, whoa, you can imagine the torment that would have been happening in this moment. And all of a sudden, it says in verse 21, she said, she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God. So something in her went, okay, I've done this, and I'm doing it, and it's not good. This is not good, but one thing I know, I'm going to the room where the man of God was, and I'm going to put my boy there. Maybe, just maybe that'll work. Maybe that will come to pass. Maybe something will happen there. And she carries him up, she takes him there, and she lays him on the man of God and shuts the door behind him. And she leaves that room. She walks out. She calls her husband. She says, please, now picture this. she has just lost her son, and she walks outside. Please send me a servant and a donkey that I may go to the man of God. I can hear the voice going, please send me a donkey and a servant so I can go to see the man of God. And the husband says to her, he says, worry, it's not the Sabbath moon. Nothing special that you need to go to him. In verse 2, then she calls her husband, 22, send me the donkey, send me that I may run to the man of God and return. 23, he said, why will you go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, it will be well. Was it well? Was it well at all? But something, so she's taken the son, laid him on the prophet's bed. There's some connection there where she's gone, maybe this part, maybe if I put him here. How many times do we try everything but put him here? That's going to work. It doesn't work. She closes the door, goes downstairs, calls out to the husband. He says, why do you want to do that? She goes, because it'll be well. He doesn't know the son's dead right now. I don't even know if he ever knew. I don't know. But the thing is this, he goes on, it says this, and she said, it'll be well. Then she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slow down the pace for me unless I tell you. I don't know. I Googled people riding and jumping on donkeys this week. She was hooking it. We're talking speed gun back in that day. She would have been arrested. That's the speed she wanted to go. She was in a hurry. She was definitely in a hurry. I watched a lady this week riding a donkey bareback, and she was like a Harley rider. That's exactly what she was doing. I thought, my goodness, what would it have been like? They wouldn't have had any padding. They wouldn't have had the stuff. Maybe they had a sackcloth. Maybe she put something. Maybe she put a big pillow on her bum. I don't know. Whatever she did, she was determined to get there. And to drive and go forward and do not slow down the pace unless I tell you. So it doesn't say she did, verse 25. So she went and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. That's a whole new story in itself just there, but we're not focusing on that. When the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi, his servant, behold, there is the Shunammite. Again, sorry, my Monty Python brain kicks into gear. There is the Shunammite. But he goes, behold, there is the Shunammite. Please run to meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she says this, it is well. Oh my goodness, that is not true. It is not well. It is well, she goes. It is well. When she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught hold of his feet, so she's gotten past the security guard. She's snuck right past him. Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Don't you worry about a thing. She gets past him and she comes up to him and she grabs him by the feet. She grabs him by the feet and she goes, Gehazi comes over. The Bible says Gehazi comes over and goes to move her away. Like, get away from here, woman. What are you doing? What are you doing, you crazy lady? Caught hold of his feet and Gehazi came near to push her away, but the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is troubled. Whoa. Troubled? You ain't seen squat yet. Her soul is troubled. And he said, for some reason, the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. Can you imagine the stubbornness of her as she held on to Elijah's feet and felt Gehazi, that was a good burp. Gehazi pushed against her. like trying to release her from it. Can you imagine? You are not going to get me off this. I have got the man of God, and I'm going to get everything back that I asked for, because it is well, all inside here. It is well. It is well. The man of God says, let her through. She is in anguish. She is in deep, deep sorrow. And this is what she says when he says, let her alone. Verse 28. Did I ask for a son from my Lord? Can you imagine the face right now? Did I ask for that son? Did I? I reckon the tears and the dust and the everything would have just been all melded and muddy and all this sort of stuff on her face. Did I ask for that son? Did I not say, don't deceive me with it? Did I not say it? So then the prophet obviously gets the seriousness of the matter, turns straight to Gehazi. Doesn't say it, says anything to her. But I can imagine she would have been holding on to him, just sobbing. I made it to where I needed to get. This is the one I needed to see. And it says in the next verse that he says to Gehazi, take my staff, rest it on the boy's face, and he'll come to life. Oftentimes we have got issues that we face before us, and we all go and do our thing that we know to do. Like take the staff and put it on the problem, and it doesn't fix it. Because we haven't, that's the next part of the sermon. But we try so hard to do it this way, and then we go, it doesn't work, and then we come away going, it doesn't work. See, all this stuff about God, all this stuff about life and faith and giving finances and all this sort of stuff doesn't work, because why we're doing it our way, as not his way, Yahweh's way. His way. See, there's nothing about God here. If you read this story, God's not saying anything much here. Elisha is doing what he's doing because he's a man of God. He's a faith. He's acting out what he does. And so, okay, all right, Elijah's dead. Now I'm the guy. Here's my stuff. Take it. Put it on his face. I can just see it. Take the stuff. Quick. Run. Put it on his face. He's popped back to life. It's going to work. It don't work. It doesn't work at all. It's like, I can see Gehazi going, maybe I've got or maybe. It didn't work. It didn't find its space. Why? Because there was something else. And it goes on, gird up your loins, take my staff in your hand and go your way. If you meet anyone, don't salute them. In other words, don't greet them. And if anyone salutes you, ignore them. Rude. Just ignore them. Keep going, because this is the absolute moment that they're in. It says, lay my staff on the lad's face. The mother said this, as the Lord lives. As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So she's going, you can send him. You can do your stick thing. But I'm staying with you. I am sticking it out with you. Because you're the man of God. I built the room for you. We did these things, and we're going to see, because it is well. Remember, I didn't ask. You gave. I think this is an amazing story. This is an amazing story. The mother said, as the Lord lives and you yourself live, I will not leave you. And he arose. So then he goes, this is like, as I'm reading this, I'm going, Elisha is like kind of slow on the uptake here. Like if it was me, like right now, I'd be going, heck, she's come, he's dead, let's go. Woo. But he's sitting there going, all right, she's determined. This woman is determined. And he arose and followed her. Then Gehazi passed on before them, laid the stuff. So he's running flat out. There'll be sweat, there'll be stuff flying off him, I'm for sure. Probably lifted up his skirt and took off. Then Gehazi passed on before them, laid the staff on the lad's face, but there was no sound or response. So he returned to meet him and told them. So he's run back now. The lad has not awakened. Verse 32, when Elisha came into the house, behold, the lad was dead and laid on his bed. So he entered and shut the door behind them both and prayed to the Lord. And when he went in and laid on the child and put his mouth on his mouth. Just the fact that this is happening. Listen to this. Puts his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes. What else does he do? And he stretches himself out, and the flesh of the child becomes warm. Now, there's a whole correlation here between Jesus and all this sort of stuff, but I'm not talking about that today. This is what we're talking about today. It is well. Stretched himself out, and the flesh of the child became warm. Then he returned. So he got up. He didn't actually come back to life. He got up and went and stretched himself on the lad, and the lad sneezed 7 times. And the lad opened his eyes. And there's a whole thing on sevens too, I get that, but I'm not going into that either. All right, so that's another day, another life, and another pastor most likely. But sneezed 7 times, and the lad opened his eyes. He called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. Again, no name. What's wrong with this woman's name? Call the Shunammite. So he calls her, and when she came in to take him, he said, take up your son. Then she went in and fell at his feet and bowed to the ground. She took up her son and went out. That is an incredibly amazing story of someone who has just been given something that they particularly weren't adamant about having, but because they made room for the man of God, the blessing came. The blessing came upon it. And she was determined that this was from God, to understand it was, so much so that all through the journey, she says, it is well, when it wasn't. It seems that stuff happens when you make room for God. Interesting, eh? Stuff happens when you make room. Nowhere do we see Elisha, as I said before, say, God told me, or to tell you that you're going to have a son. He wanted to do something good for somebody that had done well for them. She even says, don't do this. Imagine all the years that she waited and wanted a child, looking at children playing with their families. Imagine what she would have felt every time. And yet this guy comes through and says, you're going to have one this time next year. When the word comes to pass, the gift that she was given ends up dying. But there was something in her that went, I'm going to the man of God. I'm going to God. I'm going to go and seek out what is going on here, because I believe this was a gift and it's going to live. This gift will live. I'm not speaking of this to anyone else but him. See what she did? She kept saying to people, it is well. It is well. It is well. She didn't go and talk to everybody else about her problem. She didn't go, now I want you to hear me here. I have a coach sitting here. I have trained counselors sitting there. I'm not talking about not going to talk to people. I'm talking about go and talk to people, get that advice, but you got to come to a place in yourself where you go, it is well. There is a point in our lives as followers of Christ where you have to eventually grow up in your maturity in Christ, as we heard this morning, and you come to a point and you go, it is well. When all hell is breaking loose, when everything isn't going well, when everything seems wrong. The problem is when I come to a person, I go, well, you know what, Chanel, I've been really struggling through this. And Chanel, if she's not well, she goes, oh, isn't that really hard? I don't really understand that about my walk with the Lord. But if she is well in her soul, when I come to her and go, Chanel, I'm really struggling with this. I don't know what to do. And she might be going on the inside, I don't know what to do either. But what I do know is if we come to God, it is well. I have a coach. I'm starting a new coaching thing with my own life, my personal life, on the 19th of April. I'm really excited about it. So it's not about not going to a coach. It's about, or not going to a counselor, or going to somebody who can help you. It's taking the things that they give you, because I've done coaching before with people. I've been the recipient of coaching many times and never changed. Because why? Because I'm the one that's got to go, it is well with me to be able to do this. It's me that's got to change still. It's me. They can do all they want. They can paint the house red and blue, and I can go and buy $1 million and go on a holiday in Europe and New Zealand and all those places. But when I come back, guess who's still there? Me. And if I don't think that it is well, it's no good for me to go to people who aren't well and say, well, it's not well. We can look at the floods going on up there and go, well, how can we say that to people who've just lost everything? Folks, I'm talking to believers who in their heart have gone, God, you've got this. I'm not talking to people who don't have God in their heart, because you can't have a well life without Him. You cannot live well without God. Now you can say, oh, well, there's rich people and there's people that prosper. Sorry, without God, all that fades away. All of it fades away. So when you meet a person who's experienced the flood and you haven't, but it is confirmed in your heart that it is well, God is good, God is with me, you don't walk around the streets of England and go, it is well, it is well, it is well. They'll kill you. But if you know it is well. None of this matters. My house being blown away in a cyclone does not matter. It's sad and it's grieving and it's a loss of a lot of stuff, but it is still well. Because God is my supply. We tend to tell people all about it. We go around going, oh, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that, I'm struggling with this. I love it when I meet somebody and tells me something and I go, oh, wow, I didn't know. But when you meet somebody, and then you meet somebody who tells you about that person and everything they've been going through, and you've spoken to 10 people who've told you the same story, immature. Sorry. But it is not well. You haven't come to a place, I haven't come to a place. I've got spaces in my world where it is not well. I have other spaces where it is well. But the spaces of it is well are overwhelming and consuming my it is not well's world. And the more I focus on God and the more I come to Him and say, God, I don't get this. I don't understand it, why this is happening. I don't understand what my son with his money goes, Dad, I don't get it. I've tithed. They had a deposit, a really good deposit for their house 4 years ago, just when COVID broke out, 5 years ago. A really good deposit. Like I'm saying, really good. And they went to a church service. Oh, church and money. And the pastor got up, well, not this church, another church. Pastor got up and took up their big annual offering they take. They raised like over $2 million or something like that. And they were in the meeting. And they said, Dad, we really felt in our heart to give it, to sow it. So they did. It's been 5 years. And I've watched them just, their language. It is not well. Why? Well, I did this. This is the language. I did this, so God should. God shouldn't do anything. I'm trying to turn it. Oh, don't worry. I'm the same. You know, I've been a pastor since I was 18 years old. I became a youth pastor, and now I'm a senior pastor, and I've been in it for a long time. What's that, for 30 years? 40 years. Oh, my goodness. I've been in this for 40 years, and I look around and I go, but God, I did this, I've served, I've done this, it is not, and I've realized it has not been well. I was talking to this guy that's taking on my coaching this week, and I said to him, he goes, how are you doing? And I was able to say, it is well. It is well. Because I told him a little bit of my journey, and I said, I've been on this journey and through the Word, and it's just been incredible. And I said, I've come to a place of going that God has got my life, and it's okay to be where I am because He's got and He's changing me. A lot of times we try to say it is well, and it's not, and we're denying what has actually happened and not acknowledging it. It's okay to acknowledge what's going on. Very much okay. I'm not a counselor, and I don't pretend to be, and do not want to be. It's not my gift. It's not who I am. I grew up in a household where a mother said, grow up and get over it. I've adopted that in most of my life. Some things you just got to suck it up and get on with it, and other times you've got to go and seek help. As I get older and I do my resilience training at work, I know I now have to go and seek help. But that help doesn't solve my answer. That help just opens a door to me to come back to the Lord and go, Lord, it is well, because I know you've got me in this. She knew how the child came about, who it was she needed to go to. You see, when you know what's going on in your world, you know who you need to go to. Please know I'm not discouraging you talking to people about it, or your best friend even. If that's what it is, please talk to them. But come and seek yourself, push through everything else, all the other voices that are going, what's this about? What's going on here? You know it's not the right time. You know this, you know that. Keep pushing through and keep saying it is well, because you'll get to the right place like she did. I can seek advice, as I'm saying, but come to a place of it. This is what I wrote this morning when I was praying about it. But to come to a place of it is well, in the midst of what I'm going through, comes through knowing that it is God and God alone who truly satisfies my soul with true contentment. It's only God that can satisfy me. It is only God. When you see when it is well with me, I can then reach out to the world. When it's not well in the church, you can tell when it's not well in the church. And I got this feeling at the moment that it's starting to become well, really well with the church. Because we're being persecuted. We're being told what we can and can't do. Things are beginning to happen across the globe that are anti. And I actually think this is a good thing, because it starts to stir us up to become people who begin to believe, do we know God? Do we know him? Am I one that is walking with him? Well, you see, when it's well with me, I can then reach out to others. When people, it isn't well with them, but it is well with me. It's well with me. Why? Because I've got my life together? No, it's well with me because I know who does. It is well with me. It is well with you, our church, because we know who's got us. We know who's going to pour that driveway. It might be a bunch of trucks and people walking around out there, and we may raise the money or borrow the money or whatever we do to get it, but it will be God and God alone that we know helped us get there. We know that when people walk in those doors, that walk in these doors every week, people week after week, people who are lost and broken and hurting. It's not our music, it's not my preaching, it's not anyone's words, it's not even the door greeters, but it's us who in our hearts go, it is well. So when the world walks in this door, they walk into a place where it is well, where people go, it is well. We've dealt well with each other. We've dealt well with our walk with the Lord. And so when they walk in here, they'll go, something's wrong about this place. It is well. Not, oh, we're just as scared as you, or we're just as useless as everything else, because you know why? Because we begin to realize that, you know what, I can't do it on my own, but God and God alone can do it. When I battle with mental stress, when I battle with all the sorts of things that Darren battles with, when I don't feel adequate enough, when I don't feel, what I've discovered is I can now come to my God and go, but Lord, this is who I am. You have called me, and I will walk to you because it is well with me. It is well. And when it's well, the world will tremble. They won't like everything necessarily, because when I go, God, I'm coming to you. I'm making room for you. I'm making room. I'm making room by reading my Bible. Please don't tell me I don't want to read. I can't read my Bible. It's too hard. I don't understand it. You are talking to Mr. Understanding all the time, who put reading off the Bible because I didn't get it. Put it off, and people come to me, I can't read the book of Revelation, that's too scary. It's now my favorite book with Job. Go figure. Jonah, Job, Revelation are becoming my favorite books of the Bible, because there's something in there that cries out and goes, it is well. Jonah in chapter 2 repents and gets vomited out onto the beach. Amazing. And then he turns out to be a real douche. How can that be? Because he hadn't resolved in his heart, it is well. Whether he saves my enemies or not, it doesn't matter, because God, you be glorified in the midst of it. God, you be strong. You are the strength, not me, you. I come running to you. My grave clothes stink. But it's stench, it's stink. And I come to him and go, God, it is well with you. You come in and you bring calm in the turmoil. When it's well with you, you bring calm into the peace. My sister, she'll probably watch this. She tells me she watches it every week, so son, I'm putting you out there. She says to me, I love when I call you, because your mum, we're going through everything with mum, dementia and stuff like that. And she said, well, I had a big chat the other day because some stuff has been happening, and it's been a real bit of a hard time for our family at the moment. And she rang me, and she rang me in the midst of the trouble, and I had her laughing, and by the end of it, we were having a little joke about stuff. And she sent me a text that night, and she said, Daz, I just want to say thank you because you bring calm to my soul when I don't feel it. And I know it's a gift that God's given me and all that sort of stuff with people, and I'm not good at it all the time, especially your own family. It's really hard to do it in your own family, but I can do it with others. When people come at me and they're angry about stuff at work, and I just sit in the office and go, so what do you think we should do about that? And it just goes, and they walk out going, oh, that was funny. And my boss comes in and goes, what the heck did you do? Were angry as? I said, I don't know. Just talk, let them hear what they need to say. Half the time it's not right, and then they go, one lady I spoke to recently, and she was ropeable. And I just asked her one simple little question, just a little tiny question. I said, so where are you in this? And she goes, well, it's not about me. Well, it kind of is, because where are you in this? And she said, I got to go. I said, that's okay. I said, you can go. I said, I just want you to know I'm thinking of you, and I hope you're okay with this. And she wrote back to me. She goes, okay, I've thought about what you've said, and this is probably my part in the middle of it. And I said, that's awesome. What could you do about it? What should you do? And she goes, well, I could probably start doing things this way and that way. I said, brilliant. I did nothing. But all of a sudden, I'm one of the great HR guys. Why? Because I know it is well. It's just stuff. It's not about you saying to them it is well when they've told you a tragic story. But it's you knowing that it's well. Because you can only say it when it is. And I finish with this, because I've gone over time. Horatio Spafford. Some of you are going, who's that? He's the author of the song, It Is Well With My Soul. I didn't know this until I studied this song this week, and I know the story about the kids, the 4 daughters that died. Most of you probably, who knows the song, It Is Well With My Soul? His 4 daughters were tragically killed in a boat crossing. 2 boats ran into each other, and it sank in 12 minutes, and they died, and his wife survived. I did not know this. He was also a very wealthy man, and he was a huge giver and a close friend of D.L. Moody, who some of you are going to go, who the heck is that? But D.L. Moody and him were very close friends. And D.L. Moody was an evangelist back in the 1800s. And he was giving lots of money to them. And then the Chicago fires hit, and all his wealth was in real estate, and he lost it all. This is before his daughters died. Prior to the fires of Chicago, he was a Christian at this time, by the way, too. He wasn't just didn't get saved and wrote that song. That was the last thing. That was at the end. Just before the fires came, he lost his son to scarlet fever. So he knew tragedy. He knew what it was to be able to say, to have the authority to say, it is well. He lost all his finances. And the whole reason that he lost his entire family was that he was sending them to Europe. He was going over to England to meet with D.L. Moody in a big evangelistic campaign. And what happened was when the fires came, all his money and everything got destroyed. Everything went bad for him, so he had to stay back. So he sent his family on ahead. And the girls were all going to meet him when he came over days later. And they were going to do a holiday in Europe because of all the stress they'd been through Rio. They were all about to go on a big holiday. This is the thing I read. So whether it's true or it's just a Google story, but it sounds good. I feel like it's true because it was mentioned a few times in other places. And so he sent them on ahead, and then the ships collided, and he lost his 4 girls because the ship went down so quickly, and his wife was the only one who survived. And she sent a message saying, standing alone. And he obviously got there really quick. I don't know if he went on to be with the evangelist in England or anything like that. Doesn't really purport to it. But as he did, he penned, as he was sailing back over. This is for those of you who don't know the story. I know a lot of us do because it's a very old story. But as he went past the area where the ship sunk, he penned these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul, it is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let his blessed assurance control." I apologize for all the haths and thous and things, but it sort of gives what it gives. "Let this blessed assurance control that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate, nothing I can do, and hath shed his own blood for my soul. My sin, oh the bliss." So imagine, he's now passing the spot where he's lost everything now. Just like the woman, the Shunammite woman, had lost everything, but she was now saying the same thing, really, with saying, "My sin, it is well. My sin, oh my sin, the bliss of this glorious thought, my sin, not in part but the whole, is nailed to his cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. For me, be it Christ hence to live, if dark hours about me shall roll. No pang shall be mine, for in death as in life, thou shalt whisper thy peace to my soul." The Shunammite woman, in the midst of her deep, incredible pain, full of sorrow, or as Elisha put it in the word, her soul is troubled, could say it is well. The question that I have for you and myself is it well with you?